What's going on, everybody? Nick Costa here, and today I want to show you how to set up the Roland TD-1DMK electronic drum set. If you are a fellow teacher for the School District of Philadelphia, I hope this video helps you out so you have a visual on how to set up this drum set for your classroom. With the holiday season around the corner, if you are not one of those music teachers, but you were to receive this drum set, you're going to now have a visual on how to exactly set it up and get ready to play it right away. So in this video, I'm gonna go over taking everything apart and setting it up from the ground up. Luckily for us with this particular set, everything is included minus a seat and a bass drum pedal. So let's dive right in and get into setting up this kit. Best part about this kit is that it is all in one. All of the components and everything you need, the mesh heads and pads like you see here, your cymbals, your whole stand, and the actual module that produces all of the sounds, it is all in one box. So as soon as you receive this, you can start opening it up and getting it ready for your classroom. I've already started that process, and as you can see, there's a box down here at the bottom. That is the whole rack carrier system that will put this kit together. Everything else regarding the actual drum heads, the cymbal pads, I have them laid out throughout the room here at Dobbins Technical High School. You can see here, this is the actual brain module. There's some instructions there. There's some other components here as well. And then if I go over to this side, you're going to notice that we have the drum pads up here. They're bigger boxes, and then the cymbal pads are the thinner boxes. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to get that rack system put together first out of this box, and then we can start putting everything together. So I'm gonna get this out, get all the components out of it, and I'll show you how to set it up step by step. So once you open the box, this is what you are going to see inside. You are going to see two similar bars on either side, and the good thing is that it's actually connected. These are additional bars that go on the ends. This whole rack system you see here is your middle section of the rack. So it's actually gonna stand up like so, and then we're gonna connect everything else to it so it goes out to the left and the right. So again, we wanna unbox all of this, get it out, get it on the floor, and then we'll start piecing it together. Okay, now that we have gotten everything for that rack out, you're gonna notice a few things. Number one, that center portion that I showed you earlier is right here. You also have these two bars as well. Notice how one is slightly longer than the other one. It's difficult to see unless you stand them up or put them side by side, but that is something you want to take note of because of the fact, if you look at the instructions, it'll tell you which one goes either to the left or the right. And if you look here at the instructions, you have a straight pipe L for long, straight pipe R for short. So the longer one is going to go to the left side, and the shorter one's going to go to the right side. So what you're going to have is a curved pipe is going to connect to this top portion here, and then we are going to put the longer leg on the left side. We're going to take this curved pipe, connect it to this here, and that's going to go to the shorter one. So I'm going to stand this up, and we're going to get started. So as you get started, the one thing you want to make sure you do is you have a drum key. There should be one in there, but if you have an extra one lying around, it's going to be super helpful in case you need it later down the line. Luckily with this stuff, when we have to shift it, everything is all turnkey knob style. So we're just going to turn these to loosen them up, and then we can rotate from side to side. It's a little difficult to do with one hand while holding the phone. So you can see what I'm doing here is just loosening and turning a little bit. I'm going to turn them and connect those bars to those connections, and then we can go from there. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind when you're setting up this rack system, you want it to be almost like it's fanning out. You don't want them to come straight out in a straight line either way. You want it to angle outwards. So if you take one of these curved pipes, the curve should actually go away from the drummer, and then you are going to insert it right into the connection. If you can't get the pipe into the connection, you need to take your drum key and you need to loosen this tension rod right here. That will allow you to put this into place. You don't want to tighten it back just yet because you may have to pivot this a little bit. So just make sure that it gets in, make sure it's snug and that it won't fall out. and then you can connect your pipe to it. Once you do that, then you can connect your base to it and then go from there. Notice with that taller arm, notice how the connection is a little bit higher up. So you have to take your drum key, loosen this tension rod, move this whole mechanism down, and then make sure this is loose enough so the pipe can actually be inserted. You want to make sure that this leg is flat on the floor. It's going to want to angle itself depending if this connection right here isn't put on properly at the right height. So as long as that base is flat, because we want it to be nice and sturdy, then you should be able to make sure this connects to that pipe, and then you don't have any problems. So now you're going to see with this particular setup, that curved pipe is connected to your center and your end post. And notice that you have a flat base with the leg, as well as the two flat bases for the center post as well. That allows us to know that we are set to go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our drum key and we are going to tighten up these connections. That's going to allow us to confirm that this is set up properly and it won't move. So we're going to lock this bar in place. And then finally, to make sure the height does not adjust as well. So now we're going to repeat that process for the other side. Okay, so you can see here I did the same exact thing. Curved bar is connected to the piece there. We had to lower this again by loosening this tension rod right here. Now that I can see that all four legs are flat on the floor, I know that all of this is set up correctly. So take our drum key and we are going to tighten this. Notice that that height just adjusted a little bit, which is okay for right now, because what I'm trying to do is just make sure that this is in place so that doesn't move. So we're going to tighten those two spots first and make sure that's at the proper height. Now I just had to raise it a little bit because I noticed that this leg started to lift off of the ground. So I wanted to raise this a bit just to make sure, again, all four of those platforms are set to go. So now that we have that in place, the next portion is that snare drum tube. So what we're gonna do is we are going to loosen this. Again, it's got that turnkey wing nut, so we can move it like that. And then we are going to take this pipe. Notice that you have an open end on one side, closed end on the other. The closed end is what's going to face your drummer. So in this case, what we're doing is basically imitating a snare drum stand, but with a bar. So I just have to make sure that this is loose enough so we can get this pipe in, and then we can go from there. Okay, now that that's in, what you do is you actually push this all the way in until it can't go any further. You have plenty of length here, and I'll show you that mechanism for the snare drum actually attaches to this, and then you can adjust it either forward or backwards. So once that gets into place, again, we want to tighten it so it doesn't come out accidentally, and we are set to go. Now, we do have these cymbal arms over here, but we're going to wait until the very end because we want to get the drums themselves installed on this rack unit first, and then we can slide these clips right here to make sure that our cymbals are in the right position. Now, before we attach any drums to this rack system, we want to make sure the kick drum module gets installed as well as the pedal riser to the rack system. So what we have to do is actually turn this flat. We're going to remove this leg and then install this, which actually slides right in place. And then this goes in place as well to make sure that we can attach a kick drum pedal to it. So let's get to it. Okay, you can see I now turn this rack on its side. This is very easy to remove. You just have to pull straight down, and then we have to attach this. Now we want to make sure that we attach it correctly. So notice that your pipe here, you want to make sure that's on the right side. So when it attaches, it actually hangs out into the center. That's going to allow us to make sure that we're going to get contact with our bass drum pedal. So with that being said, we want to make sure this is loose first, which it is, and then we're going to slide that right up, but I need both hands to do that. So give me a second and then we'll go from there. Okay, so now you can see that is connected. You don't have to worry about making sure it's in the correct height. We'll make those adjustments later on. Then we're going to take one of these clamps here and we're going to install that onto the bar as well. So once you have this mechanism in place, what we want to do is reattach this base to the leg, like so. and then pick the whole rack unit back up. You're gonna notice it's not very heavy at all. So now we wanna get the bass drum riser in place. So we wanna make sure that is flat on the floor. And now we can slide this down to make sure that we can put that right into place. Again, just make sure that this plate here is flat on the ground because you can turn it upwards or downwards. You just want it to be flat. Once you do that, you can tighten that to hold it in place. And then you tighten the other side so it doesn't swivel on you. Now that we have all that set up, this bass drum module, we want to make sure we slide it so it is parallel to this riser plate right here. Because again, we're attaching a kick drum pedal to it. So when we press on that bass drum pedal, we're actually hitting the pad itself and we're hitting it straight on and not on an angle. So just kind of eyeball it for right now. Again, this is something that we can adjust once we get the pedal on this plate at the very end. So now that all is in place, it's time to attach the drums and then the cymbals. Okay, so you're going to notice in your package that you're gonna have arms in one, and then you're gonna have these two clamps as well. These arms are actually the mounting system for the drum pads themselves. So the three that look the same are for your toms. The one that has this bass on it is for your snare drum. These two are actually going to be connected for the two rack toms. And then if you look over here, we're gonna use this clamp for the floor tom, and we're gonna use this one for the ride cymbal. So the first thing that we wanna do is we wanna take these clamps here and we wanna attach one to each post on either side. That's going to allow us to attach our rack toms and have them in place. Now, when we go to attach these clamps to these bars here for the rack toms, if you're somebody who likes to pay very close attention to detail like I do, notice that there's a Roland logo on one side and there's nothing on the other. So we want to actually have those Roland logos facing out so when people walk around they can go, hey, this is a Roland product. So in this case, since the Roland logo looks like it's on the left side of this clip, we are going to place it on this bar like so. And then don't worry about the height. That's something we can adjust later. We want to tighten this to hold it in place. And then we're going to take one of these L arms and we're going to insert it in that back slot. Notice that I have the L arm facing the outside of the rack and not the inside. That's going to allow us to make sure we have enough space for our rack tom. Now that that is in place, we are going to repeat the process for the other side. Place this like so. Take another L arm. You can see there I'm just tightening that. Now we have those two in place. Now, when we are actually putting on L arms for rack toms, you don't want them to be straight up. You want them to have a slight angle towards your drummer. That's going to allow those toms to be on an angle and not flat, so you don't accidentally hit the rim while you are playing. We have to repeat that process for the snare drum over here. So once you do that, the next step is to take the clamp that is furthest away from the center portion, and this is what we are going to use for our floor tom. Now, with that being said, we are going to loosen it, put it in place like so. Notice our L arm is like that. So if we attach it this way, not quite going to work, now is it? So we actually want to go from the bottom to make sure that that arm is furthest away from this connection right here. We are going to tighten it, and then if we loosen this, move it upwards, now all of a sudden we have a connection for our floor tom. And notice our Roland logo is facing out. Okay, now that we have those set up for the rack tom and floor toms, we now have to set up another clip for our snare drum. So again, we want to make sure that this is loose. It gets inserted on this pipe right here. And I'm just turning it because of the fact that I am holding my phone while trying to install this, and it just makes it a little bit easier. Once it's on that bar, the other portion you want facing downwards, we're going to tighten. And then again, we're going to take the L arm, this time the one that has that pad on it. We're going to insert it on the left-hand side, and then we are going to tighten that bottom clamp, which I'm going to attempt to do with one hand. All right. So now that all of that is in place, we can start putting those pads on the rack system. Okay, so now that we are going to attach the drum pads to the rack system, you're gonna notice we have 4 pads, but one of them is slightly larger than the other 3. That is going to be your snare drum pad. The other 3 are going to be those 2 rack toms that go on the very top here, 1, 2, and then your floor tom here, number 3. It does not matter which one of these smaller pads goes in which section, because of the fact that there are specific cables that get plugged into them, which we will go over later on in this video. So what we are going to do is we are going to grab these, and you can stack them. You don't have to worry about it. They get hit with sticks, so they're pretty durable. And if you can pick them all up with one hand, sweet. Okay, so now that you're over at your kit, you want to make sure that there is absolutely no tension with that wing nut going into the center portion. And then come up to the kit, insert it like so, and then tighten. Notice that now that that is in place, I didn't go all the way to the bottom, and you don't want to do that as well, because that's actually going to screw up how this is actually held in place. So if you're noticing that this rack is too high, you can adjust a little bit, but you don't want to go all the way to the bottom. You could probably go halfway or so. I wouldn't go any further than there. And then if you have to adjust, that's when we loosen this clamp and lower the whole thing. But for right now, we're gonna leave it as is and get those other toms in place. So we're gonna take this one here. Again, same process. Notice that having a difficult time putting that in place, because look, that's what it looks like when the wing nut is actually putting some tension on it. So we have to loosen that, and then it slides right on, no problem. So what you want to do is you want to make sure these 2 rack toms are actually angled inwards slightly, and that they're at the same height. So that one angled like so, this one angled like so. So notice they're angled inwards. They are not completely touching, but you want them to be pretty close to one another to make it easier to play from tom 1 to tom 2. So the next step is we're going to slide our snare drum pad out of the way, and now we have to attach the floor tom. Same thing, make sure that wing nut is loose. That goes into place. Again, you don't want to go all the way down. Now you're in place. So what you want to make sure that you do with your rack tom, you want to make sure that it is not angling away from the drummer either way. You actually want to have it set up in a way so you're more like that. Now, you can have a little bit of an angle on your floor tom towards the snare drum, since your drummer is actually sitting there in that center. So if that's what you want to do, you're actually just going to loosen this wing nut here. And again, you slide the whole mechanism downwards. Now, if you need some extra height with this, that's where we are going to loosen and raise that just a little bit higher. If for some reason you need it to be lower, same thing, you just lower it down the bar a bit. So now that all of that is in place, the next step is attaching our snare drum. Remember, this pad is slightly larger than the other ones, but again, we want to make sure that this wing nut has no tension and that we are going to put it into place like so. We are actually going to put it right down on top of that pad, as you can see. And then as far as this is concerned, you want to have a little bit of gap between your snare drum and your rack tom, but you don't want it to be too close that you can't put that leg for the bass drum pedal in between them. So you want to have a little bit of a distance separating the two. So we're going to do that for now. Tighten, we are good to go. So you're going to notice that that snare drum is actually closer to the drummer than the floor tom, and it's pretty far from everything else. So what we want to do is we actually want to loosen this top portion here, and the drum is going to slide, but then we are going to slide this whole mechanism further back on the bar, which I'm going to have to use 2 hands to do. Now that I have slid this back, you're going to notice that these are in line with one another, and then we have our rack toms. So now see how your rack toms are angled inwards to one another? And then what I also did is I angled these rails to go inwards a bit towards your drummer. That way they're not flat and you don't accidentally hit the rims while you are playing. So now that we have all of that set up, the next step is to put these cymbal arms in place. Actually, the longer one should be for your ride. One of them should be for a crash cymbal. The other one's actually for your hi-hat. All right, so now that we have those cymbal stands in place, here's what I want you to look at. Notice here, the cymbal stand on the far left is the lowest. That's for our hi-hat. So if we were actually to walk over to an actual drum kit, this is what we are trying to imitate here. So that furthest one is our hi-hat, and then we have crash cymbal and ride cymbal. Usually your ride cymbal is slightly lower than your crash, and your hi-hat is kind of in between, either being in line with your ride cymbal or slightly lower. The last thing you want to do is have your drummers picking their elbows up away from their body in order to play this hi-hat. So we want to make sure that it's at a nice low height. So if we go back over to this kit, that's what we're imitating over here. Now, with those clamps on the rack system for them, notice that they have a little bit of an angle away from the drummer, so then when you put that cymbal arm in place, we then loosen and have this kind of pointing inwards a little bit. This is just a temporary thing. Again, we will make those fine adjustments once we get the cymbal pads on, and then we can go from there. One final step, you're going to notice that there is a random pedal. That is our hi-hat controller, which is going to go underneath this cymbal arm right here. So next step is we have to get those cymbal pads in place, and then we will go from there. All right, so just like the tom pads, our cymbal pads, all three of them are the same. If we actually flip them over, you're going to notice that each one of them says CY5, which is the model number of this cymbal. You're going to notice that there is only one output on each one of them because there's actually only one sensor area for each cymbal. So it doesn't matter which one you put where, but we are going to put these on the stands over here. So the first thing we want to do is actually loosen up what would be a wing nut and remove the felt here. Notice that with this pad on the bottom, we have this line in place. You're also going to notice on the cymbal itself, there's a crease. Those two things actually line up. So when we insert this onto it, we go towards the bottom here. Notice that that's all in place and lined up, ready to go. So once you do that, you're going to put the felt on top and then this wing nut. We want to make sure that when we put this wing nut on, we do not tighten it until we cannot tighten it anymore. That actually restricts the motion of the cymbal, which if it was an actual cymbal would cause it to crack, but you want to have a little bit of a wiggle with it. So if you look carefully, you're going to see that that cymbal is actually not facing the center of the kit where the drummer is. So in order to fix that, you are going to loosen this right here, and then you can turn the entire thing until it is center. So once you have this centered to the middle of the kit, you repeat the process on the other side for the crash cymbal, and then finally for the hi-hat. Okay, now that the other cymbals are set up, you're going to notice that those sensor areas are facing the drummer. All right, so now that we have all of this set up, the next step is to connect our module to the rack system. So you're going to notice in your package, you're going to have this little clip here. So you want to make sure that this tension rod is loose and it goes on the left leg, like so. Once you have that in place, you don't want to tighten it just yet because you may have to move it from side to side. I actually want to loosen it a bit more. And then what we want to do is we want to loosen this tension rod right here until it comes out completely. Now, before we actually put this in place, on the back side, you're going to notice this connection right here. And if you look, luckily Roland is kind enough to create a snake where everything is already cabled up together. So what we want to do is we want to take this end, attach it in there, and then we are going to attach it to the base. So once you have that tension rod in place, you'll notice that you should be able to turn it by hand and finger tighten. You'll notice that it'll start to poke through the center portion there. So what you want to do with this module, you just want to make sure that it's facing up. You don't have to have it completely flat like so. You also want to make sure it's out of the way of the hi-hat module. So we'll probably place it like that, and then we're going to take our drum key, tighten it in place, and then we are set to go. Okay, so now that we have tightened this, so this is held in place at the proper angle, what I did next is I swiveled this to make sure that that's actually facing the drummer, and then I tightened the back side to hold it in place. So now the next step is we have to run all of this cable to all of the different pads. Don't fear, however, they are labeled from Roland. So we are going to swing this whole thing around like so and come around the backside. Now, the one thing I want you to notice is that all of these cables are different lengths because of the fact that some of these triggers are further away from your module than others. So let's start with the closest one and work our way to the furthest one. You're going to notice that if you look, you'll notice if you look right there, it says HH, which stands for our hi-hat. We're going to connect it right in to that output module of our cymbal pad, and you'll hear it click into place. Now, moving along, you're also going to notice everything is color coordinated. So we have another orange yellow looking sticker that says HHC. That stands for hi-hat controller. That actually connects to the foot pedal for our hi-hat. So if we flip it over, you're going to notice that there is an input right on the bottom. We are going to connect that like so, and notice that Roland was kind enough to put a cutout so then when we flip it, your pedal is still flat on the ground and you don't have to worry about that cable getting in the way. Now, let's move on to the next one. So we have a red label. It has SNR, which stands for our snare drum. So if we look over here, you're going to see that there is an input. We're going to put it right in place there. So we have a blue label. It says T1. That stands for Tom 1, which is going to be this drum directly above the snare. So you'll see there is another output connection, and we are set to go. Now this green label says CR1, which is for crash cymbal 1, which is going to be this one right here. So again, we have the output. Connect that cable like so. Okay, so the next cable says T2, Tom 2. That is this one right here. Again, connects right into the output. Now this next one is a black label, says KIK. That stands for kick. So we are going to attach it to the kick drum module right here. We have another blue label, says T3, stands for Tom 3. So we'll connect it to our floor tom pad. Okay, so now this next one, RD, that stands for ride cymbal, which is going to connect here. Okay, so this last one here, you're going to see there's a cap on it. I'm having a difficult time getting my camera to focus, but it actually says R2. With this particular Roland setup, we actually aren't going to use it, so you can kind of put it aside. So now you're going to notice that everything is connected and we're good to go. There is one final step, however. You're going to notice that we have these clips. They're going to help you hold all of this wiring in place so it's not a tangled mess on the other side. So it's up to you where you want to place them and how you want to organize them so it is a nice clean look. But you take those clips and you just go around the kit and connect them. Now, once you have your kit set up ready to go and you have everything connected to the brain module on the side, the one thing you have to think about is that this kit does not come with a bass drum pedal or a drum stool. So luckily Roland actually has this accessory package. It's the DAP3X, comes with a bass drum pedal, a throne, and a pair of sticks, as you can see over here. So we have to actually put this stuff together. Again, it is sold separately from the kit itself. Once you put this stuff together, then we can finish up putting the kit together. Now, with the throne, it's pretty straightforward. You have your base here. It's got 3 legs that expand outwards, and then the seat actually goes on top. So I'll take care of that and come right back. So you can see I have the base as wide as it can go because you want to have this be nice and sturdy for your drummers to sit on. Now, what you'll notice here is that as far as the height adjustment is concerned, this isn't one of the swivel ones, meaning that you would turn it clockwise or counterclockwise to adjust the height. It's actually just a bar. So now notice we have this memory lock here. So what you actually have to do is kind of eyeball and ballpark the height of your throne or your stool, lock it in place. Then you want to take a drum key and loosen this tension rod here so it drops down, and then tighten it again. if you do not do that and you just adjust the height, if somebody sits on this stool, over time they're either going to progressively sink, or while they're playing, it's going to be a drastic drop down, and it is kind of scary and it can hurt. So you want to make sure that this lock is engaged with whatever height you are at. So it doesn't matter who sits on this throne, it's going to stay in place for them. Now, once you get that height figured out, you want to make sure that, again, this wing nut is loose all the way, so it's not sticking out, and then you just insert it on the top, and then you tighten like so. So now you don't have to worry about that coming off. So now if I decided to sit on the seat, which you cannot see, but when I am sitting here, you'll notice that I am not sinking at all. Now, regarding height of the seat, you want to make sure, drummers, from your hip down to your knee, it should be a progressive decline. You do not want your thigh at a 90-degree angle, and you do not want your knee higher than your hip, because then all of a sudden you're not balanced correctly. So when adjusting the seat height, just make sure when you sit down on the seat that your hip is higher than your knee, and you're set to go. So now that that is in place, and that actually is a pretty decent height for me at least, we now have to set up our bass drum pedal. Now the best part about this Roland bass drum pedal is it already comes pre-assembled, so the only thing you have to do is attach the bass drum beater. So if you look at the pedal itself, you're going to notice the cam here. That's where the bass drum beater is going to go. So we want to look in and make sure that that tension rod is not sticking through like it is. So we're just going to take our drum key, we're going to loosen it, and that's going to allow us to slide the beater into that mechanism. Now, when you are doing this, you want to make sure that it's not fully too low, and you also want to make sure it's not too high, because that's going to kind of affect the throw of the bass drum pedal. So my rule of thumb usually is just to have a little bit sticking past the cam where the chain is located. And then that's usually a good rule of thumb, and that's a safe spot to put it. And then of course you want to make sure that the felt side is facing forward. You may see some people flip it over and use the plastic side if they want more of an attack sound on an acoustic drum. But since we're dealing with an electronic kit, it doesn't matter, just use the felt side. So I'm gonna hold this in place. I'm gonna turn the phone off so I can tighten up that tension rod with my other hand, and then I'll come right back. Okay, so now that that is tight, we are set to go. So you can give it a little test by putting your hand on it and seeing that that pedal moves back and forth. If for some reason you put your hand down on this pedal and the beater gets stuck forward, that means that this little mechanism right here is loose. So just take your drum key, reset that beater so it is actually away and not sticking straight up. Make sure it's angled back, and then you'll actually tighten this to hold it in place. So then that way, when you move the pedal, it moves the beater and it goes back to rest position. Now that we have that in place, we are going to bring it over to the drum set and put it on the kit. So remember, we talked about this riser right here. This is acting like a bass drum hoop on an acoustic drum set. So we are going to move that like so. I'll come over here. Now notice that I cannot get the pedal on there. So what we're going to do is we are going to loosen this a little bit and raise it up. Now that that's raised up, this is going to slide right on. Again, you want to make sure that all of that is straight and set to go. Now, once you have that in, notice what I just did there. You have these bottom plates that are angled inwards, and then you have the top clamp right here. And you want to just make sure that this goes in between those two things, like so. Once you do that, you'll notice that you have this wing nut right here that you tighten down. And you'll see that that top clamp clamps into place. So now you have that connection, you're set to go. We're gonna tighten this so it doesn't slide or move on us. Same thing here. And now, when you look at the bass drum, notice we're a little bit too high. So, we're now going to loosen this trigger pad and raise it up just a little bit. We wanna make sure that that beater is hitting the middle of the pad. So that's a little bit too high. So we'll bring it back down a little bit. Closer, a little further. And there we go. Once you do that, you tighten this. And you are set. So now you can see your bass drum beater. You kind of want it to hit in the middle. So we may want to shift our pedal over to the left just a hair. So what we want to do is loosen that wing nut on the bottom and just slide the pedal over a little bit. And now we're set up, ready to go. So we have our bass drum pedal set up. We adjusted the height of the bass drum trigger pad. We have our toms, our snare drum. We have all of our cymbals. We have our hi-hat pedal. We have the module set up, and it is all ready to go. So the final step is just putting the seat in place. And then we have to give it power. So we have our power supply right here. Notice it comes in two parts, part 1, part 2. So all we have to do is just connect this into here, and then we'll plug it into an outlet, and then this end plugs into the brain of the electronic drum kit. All right, so here we are with the right end. You'll go to the side of the module brain, and you just plug it right in. So now, when we plug this into an outlet, we'll have power to this, which is controlling the sounds of the rest of the drum kit. Now check this out. You have a couple options here with this particular setup. You have a USB for your computer. You also have a mix in, and you have an output for headphones. So for some reason, let's say you have a student, or maybe yourself, you want to play along to a song that you have on your phone. Simply go into the mix in, and then if you have headphones in, you'll be able to hear both the song and the drums coming out. Same thing here with the USB for the computer. You can connect and have sounds coming out of your computer, and you can hear it coming through the system. So now let's say you don't want to use headphones and you want to use an amplifier to hear everything. What you would want to do is take a 1/4 inch cable, which looks like a regular instrument, guitar, bass cable, speaker cable, and you'd want to get an 1/8 inch adapter. You'll connect that 1/8 inch adapter to one end. You'll plug into your headphone output here, and then you can plug into any amplifier like the Roland V-Drum amplifier. This is the PM100. You plug the other end into your V-Drums here, and that would allow you to have the sounds of your kit coming out of the speaker so you don't have to use headphones. And there you have it. I really hope you enjoyed this setup video. Hopefully it has helped you out. And if it did, please make sure that you give this video a big thumbs up. And also, if you want to win some free gear, hit the subscribe button as well as the bell notification for my channel so you're automatically entered to win some free stuff, including a free Skype lesson with me. Until next time, see you later.